So I want to start, since our guest speaker just noticed the first one of the first questions here from Ken Goodpaster. And so let me read it out to all the audience. And I can see that you know each other, so that is wonderful. So let me start with that one.
Oh, the love.
So here is the question. Do you think that the increasing entry of corporations into partisanship over the past decade illustrates the phenomenon that Milton Friedman feared, namely the gesture of a merger of the private sector into the public sector?
I think that a lot of Friedman's rhetoric about CSR being socialist, about CSR being a fundamentally subversive doctrine, right, is in some ways unfortunate. But I guess what I would say is that, yes, if Friedman were with us today, he would say, this is among the things I was concerned about. Whether it actually eventuates in a kind of merger of the private sector and the public sector, as the most excellent Professor Goodpaster asks, I don't know, but I think Friedman would say it's a step in that direction, and that's not a direction we want to be stepping. And I think that's where I am, and that's what I'm trying to get at with the idea of the importance of having and maintaining non-expressive spaces, right? Spaces where, just by virtue of being there, you're not endorsing some view or value or disavowing some view or value. I mean, I had this experience back in 2004, actually, while Friedman was still alive. That was a highly ugly, contested presidential election between George W. Bush and John Kerry. And there were a lot of people who were deeply invested in that election. So much so that I went to a restaurant in St. Louis that I loved. It has since closed, and I'm very sad about that, where certain items of the menu were identified as beat Bush items. And they even said, if you order this from the menu, we give $1 to the John Kerry for President campaign or whatever. And my first thought about that was, what an ugly thing. Not because I favored Bush over Kerry. In fact, if I could have that one over again, if I could have a do-over on 2004, I wish Kerry had won. Not because I necessarily have good thoughts about John Kerry, but I think I look at the historical timeline since then. I think about all sorts of bad things that would have been at least disrupted by it. But putting people in the position where ordering a dish on a menu is at least implicit support for a political outcome, I think is a really ugly thing. And yet we seem to have society-wide ever greater appetites for these sorts of things. Let's turn what in an earlier time were mundane choices into politically, into morally, into religiously, into social group promoting or smiting form. And I first of all, I think liberal society cannot survive that. Of course, a lot of people who are doing this have no particular affection for liberal society. I think liberalism is in decline, as we're all discovering. But I don't think, I think that's a path once followed that we don't actually want to live with.